Awesome. With that, we'll turn over to Dr. Dale Taylor. I'll just do a quick, brief intro. She's currently the manager of learning services at Northwest College in Canada. She's been head of school in Dakar, as well as United World College Mahindra, as well as head of school in Istanbul. She was also located in Doha, Qatar, as a founding principal. Love love that you put that founding piece in there, because there's a difference. So in the startup capacity, and worked with ACS for 6 years. We also have United Arab Emirates in common. She worked at the university level in the UAE as well as in the US. But she's been around. She's an avid reader and bibliophile. We're going to turn over to Dale to hear her story. Thanks, Dale.
Okay, thank you much, Kevin. And thank you, Ryan, and welcome everybody. In terms of land acknowledgement, I come to you from Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm in northern Saskatchewan in North Battleford, and I am in the land of the Métis. It is a privilege and a big responsibility, I feel, to speak with you today about my leadership journey. And I want to make it as relevant to you as possible. I don't want this to be just one long monologue about my life. And so I structured it by topics and format. So I tie the principles of obtaining leadership positions with my own story of my leadership journey. I hope that's okay with you all. So a little bit about my background. So I was a bit of an international global kid when I grew up. I was born in Barbados, and I was raised in Canterbury, Kent, England, and also on the prairies of Alberta in Canada. My parents were students when they went to England, and so we lived in a lot of student communities. And students came from all over the world. So at a young age, I was introduced to all sorts of cultures, all sorts of foods, and that was a norm for me. And I think I pretty much continued on with that desire to be international, even after I had my education in England and Canada, and I wanted to get out into the world as soon as possible. And I've always loved education, and education was a way of doing that. So in regards to my formal education, after high school in Ponoka, Alberta, I completed a Bachelor of Arts in sociology at McGill University in Montreal. I also completed an MA in secondary education through the college in New Jersey. I did it in Mallorca, so nobody really believes I went to school. They believe I stayed on the beach for 3 years, which is partially true. And then I completed a doctorate in educational leadership through Concordia University in Portland, Oregon. And it was very much a values-based university. It was a Lutheran university. Though I'm not Lutheran, I very much appreciated the theological aspect and the values-based education, which they promoted. And they very much promoted a culture of servant leadership, which I found absolutely fascinating. And Kevin has talked about my positions before, so I really won't go into them a lot. I'll just say I was a principal for about 8 years and a head of school for 5 years. And then recently I decided to transition back to post-secondary in an administrative role. So I'm currently the manager of learning services at Northwest College here in North Battleford. So in regards to the format of this presentation, I'll tell you a few stories, I'll hopefully impart a little bit of advice, unwarranted or otherwise, a bit of my biography, Batiki Kyler, which I'll tell you about that concept in a second, a few quotes and lessons learned along the way. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be doing, and hopefully you will stay with me for this talk and journey. Batiki Kyler, that's it's a Turkish expression, and because I don't know Turkish, they could have been fooling me, but it basically means, quote, effed up stories, where you seriously mess up, right? And I think in leadership along the way, you are going to mess up sometimes. And it's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to bounce back from that and not be ashamed to admit that things sometimes go wrong. Sometimes you make the wrong decisions. Sometimes things fall flat on their face, but we can all learn from this. So often we would have Batiki Chayla evenings where we talk about our messed up stories. Okay, so that's a bit of an introduction. I'm going to talk about the importance of a mission, your purpose, knowing oneself. Again, opportunities, take advantage of opportunities when they come your way. The importance of qualifications and experience, mentors and sponsors, the really, really valuable exercise of joining organizations. I will also talk about the sacrifice one needs to make. Again, leadership isn't, as my drill sergeant once told me, it's not a walk in the park, Taylor, right? But he actually yelled it at me. And then the way forward. So as we know, leadership is basically about others. It's all about supporting, guiding, mentoring, developing, and sometimes holding other people. And it's a grave responsibility. So it's always important to know why you want to lead, okay? And again, if you know the why, then your actions and being aligned with that, and it makes the whole process worthwhile. For me, my reason was I wanted students to have a better experience of school than I did. Going to Chardon Primary School and well, in elementary school, I love school, and my teachers were very supportive and very interesting. At the time in England in the mid-70s, I was fortunate enough to have teachers from many parts of the world, as well as many British teachers, and they instilled in me a love of learning. But as I grew older, my experience, my positive experience of education declined. And I found that who I was, my people who look like me, were not reflected in the curriculum. They were not reflected in my experience. And I felt shut out and isolated. And I can articulate that now. No way could I have articulated it back then as a 10, 12-year-old student. So basically, my impetus for going into leadership and education is I wanted the curriculum to change. That whole ethos idea now is captured by the decolonizing the curriculum movement. I also believe in working within established systems to change them. I'm not so much of an activist. That's not so much my personality. I'm more quietly subversive. And so I think if you could get into education and start to chip away to make changes, that's equally powerful. Small shifts make a great difference. All right. And also leadership does give you the authority, so to speak, or the title to make changes. And when I started in leadership almost 17 years ago, there was a lot more autonomy. So basically, once you were put in the role of principal or head of school, you can do pretty much anything you wanted within the mission of the school, obviously, and within ethical practices. And ethical practices were drilled into me during my formal study of pedagogy. But you also have to remember that was 17 years ago. Times have changed, and I think there's a lot more accountability now. And so one thing you need to remember is pay attention to the context you're now operating in. Remember the cultural context, the economic context, and the time period context. And what's most importantly, think about the generations that you are currently teaching right now, okay? I was teaching Generation Y and some millennials. Now you have Generation Z, which requires a whole new set of skills in terms of leadership and management, right? And also now we're very much in a culture of collaboration, right? And so collaboration, teamwork, that's been the buzzword for many years. But like I said, 17 years ago, it was pretty much almost a top-down sort of style of leadership. So again, know why you want to lead, know the context in which you're operating. Okay. So then, I love this quote. I love Shakespeare. And to thine own self be true. That comes from Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 3, said by Polonius. And so know your interests, know your skills, know your talents, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. And, you know, it's not all of us are cut out to be in certain leadership roles. We all can be leaders, no doubt. But if I was honest, though I was an effective head of school, I think I was even more effective as a principal because I liked juggling parents, students, senior administrators, and so on. I do love the work as head of school, and I'm comfortable in both roles, but I do have a bit of a bias, and my strengths are biased towards a certain direction, and you need to know what they are. But what's really interesting is that we often don't know our own strengths and talents. We think we do, but we don't. Now, educational leadership borrows a lot from the business realm and the field of business. And there is a man, Peter Drucker, and he is known as the founder of modern management. And he wrote a lot for Harvard Business Review. Unfortunately, he's since passed away. And again, he advocates for the importance of knowing oneself and playing to one's strengths. It's really hard to lead from one's weaknesses, right? I mean, that's an obvious statement, but sometimes we think, oh, we'll learn and we'll catch up. But I think it's always easier, and I believe in push where it's easy, when we lead from our strengths. And so he gives the example of this typology of being listeners and readers. And he gives the example of Kennedy and Eisenhower. These were American presidents, for those of you out of the American context. And he talks about them being readers. So how they learn best, how they function best, is having concrete words in front of them and notes and things like that, and then reading off of them. But in terms of press conferences and off the cuff, sporadic verbal exchanges, they weren't that strong, okay? Whereas Lyndon B. Johnson was the opposite. I'm giving you this example, all this to say, know your style, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, okay? Also, in regards to leadership, one can lead without having a title. And that's initially how I got started. I never selected I never applied for my first leadership role or my second leadership role. To be frank, I just basically followed my interests. And when I saw gaps in the schools I was in, I tried to fill those gaps, right? So, for example, professional development was all over the place. And so I took on the responsibility of leading that and organizing it and getting people together to go to NISA conferences. And because I was doing that, the administrators came back to me and asked me if I would be the PD coordinator. Okay. And then at the time, American International School, Kuwait, where I was at, they had the DP program, but they didn't have the MYP program. And again, one of my biases, middle school, I love middle school students. I love teaching middle school students. And they didn't have the MYP. And I really wanted them to explore that program. I like the framework and I like the freedom for us to implement it the way that meets the needs of the students in our school. So I just started researching the MYP. I asked to go on discovery trips. We went on discovery trips to Munich. And so when the school was ready to finally implement the MYP, they asked me if I would coordinate the MYP English courses. We didn't have an MYP coordinator at the time. We divvied it up by subjects. And so I took on the English component. I'm sure you may have questions, but if you wait to the end, I'm happy to answer all your questions. Okay. All right. If they're pressing, just jump in though. Okay. So again, think about where are there gaps in your organizations, what you can do to contribute, fill the gaps. Also, there are some areas that are very important. They may not be sexy or enticing, but they're necessary. Policy might be one of those areas. Think about that as an area to get involved in any policy reviews you want to make, or policies that you need to add. When I was working at Mahindra, as a boarding school situation, and there was a group of students who came to me. They were transgendered students, and they told me they didn't feel safe, and they wanted certain accommodation, their own accommodation. And I couldn't just give them that accommodation. We were short on space. So when I tried looking at what the policy is on this, there wasn't any. Okay, so it was important to lead that policy. But being in the position I was and so busy, I asked if others were interested in leading that policy, and they were, and so they can take it on. Because one of the main tasks you have as a leader is building other leaders, right? So delegating, giving other people opportunities to lead initiatives is really important. You're already there. You already have that position. Share the wealth with individuals. Also think about where you can innovate and take on informal leadership roles. Eventually, people will notice that, okay? And if they don't, you bring it to their attention. Qualifications and experience. Well, I completed an MA in secondary education. At the time, it was what was available to me. And at the time, I was not really interested in educational leadership. Although I was leading informally, I did not necessarily want to be a principal. I did not want to be a head of school. But I like doing those type of, having those type of responsibilities and doing the work. So what I would say now, as soon as you know that you want to go into leadership, take the courses, take the qualifications that will get you there. And the sooner, the better. And I know everybody's journey is different. Everybody's time period is different. So do what you can when you can. Okay. And when I look around and I see a lot of young administrators, especially white male administrators, and they're like leading schools at 30. I wasn't there, and I didn't have the openings and the opportunities at that time. But when you do, take full advantage of them. And the more qualifications you have, the more legitimacy it gives you. Okay. Experience is wonderful, but sometimes in certain organizations, it's a yes, no decision. Do they have that master's in education or not? Do they have that master's in educational leadership or not? You want to be filed in and not filed out. So make sure you get as much qualifications as possible. And you don't necessarily have to have a full degree. Certification is important if it's the right certification. And if you're currently working in a school, try to negotiate as best as you can for your school to help finance it, because education is expensive. When I did the Principals Training Center certificate, my school paid for all but one of the courses, and these courses were $5,000 a course back then. I'm sure it's only increased. I don't see the costs going down, but this was a course well worth taking for many reasons, not just the leadership strategies, information that it gave. The networking opportunities were phenomenal. Okay, incredibly phenomenal. And I'll talk about that a little more in terms of a networking. In regards to a doctorate, whether or not to take a doctorate, that's a very personal decision. And you have to evaluate whether the time, energy, and commitment is worth your while, and will it get you where you ultimately want to go. It is demanding. Like I mentioned before, I love education, I love studying. So I wanted to do this. And again, I saw that there were gaps in the research. I started the doctorate at Concordia when I was principal, and we were implementing the IBDP for the first time. And we were basically all clueless as to how to do this. So when we went to other schools to find out how, I went to the literature to find out how best to implement, there wasn't a lot out there. So I had a research question formulated in my mind, and I wanted to pursue this. I was going to pursue that research anyway, so might as well do it within the context of a degree. And I thought, because there's such a paucity of information, others might be able to benefit from that. And they have. People write dissertations and they kind of sit on the shelf, and only you and your advisor read it. But I've been very fortunate. Over 1,000 people have downloaded my dissertation. And what's interesting, it's yes, educators have done it, but it's mostly business, right? Because I think they're looking at strategies in terms of building schools or building programs and finding out certain things. But regardless who's reading it, they're reading it, right? Or reading parts of it. So I felt it was a valuable exercise. It was blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of tears, but it was worth it. But only you can decide if that will be valuable for you. Okay, so mentors and sponsors. So if you do not have a mentor or sponsor, get one, and it could be in the field of education, it can be in other fields as well, other people who are leading. They not only act as guides, but sponsors can open doors and opportunities too. And also, these people usually have a large network themselves. So if they don't have positions available for you, they may know of others who definitely do. And having a huge network can only benefit you. And sponsors may come from unlikely places. It has in my experience. So it is really important to be always pleasant, charitable, willing to help others. You don't know when that will come back in terms of karma to help you out as well. And I have 3 stories here to tell you that illustrates that. So when I was at the PTC in London, I think it was Croydon, and Croydon is a pretty iffy place, but we were in the nice part of Croydon. And during the break time, they would serve this awful, awful coffee. So I would sneak out every break time and go down to the village to have some coffee. And then I saw 2 others, going in the same direction, and they were going to have coffee too. And these were 2 Turkish people. And so every day we would kind of rush out, sneak out, have a coffee, walk back, and I got to know them. And we just started talking in general, just very friendly. After the PTC unit, we went our separate ways. And then about 3-4 months later, I get an email from a head of HR in Istanbul. And they said, Alvin was talking about you. Alvin was the person I had coffee with. And Alvin doesn't know I'm writing you, but our head of school is leaving soon. And would you be interested in coming to check out our school? And I said, yes. And I went and checked out the school. Alvin was surprised to see me there. And then I went back again for a formal interview, and they offered me the position. And it was only through Alvin just chatting away that the HR found out about me and approached me. And so again, those instances are important, and the networking opportunities when you take these short courses or certificates are really important. Diane Wren, who became a mentor, she was the one who hired me to be the founding principal of ACS. Now, at the time, they needed to hire a lot of people really quickly. I had been an assistant principal, and I had applied for a principal position prior, but that was a disaster because in hindsight, I didn't have that knowledge base, which I subsequently received from the Principals Training Center. So I went into that interview a lot more confident. Diane was somebody who did not see color whatsoever. It's like, can you do the job or not? Are you willing to work 24/7 or not? And she showed me the necessity and benefit of hard work and extreme discipline. She really was a mentor by example. And then the final story I'll tell you about, which was very interesting. Well, to me, I hope that you get something from it. And that is when I was a finalist for a head of school position in Lisbon. And 3 of us were invited over there to be, candidates for the role. And the 2 other guys, they were pleasant enough. One looked totally disinterested, always showed up for things late, all sorts of things. The other one was really on the ball, right? He was really good. But I chatted with them, talked with them. We were all very friendly and everything. And then I did not get the position, but I thought Chris obviously had the position. So I wrote and I congratulated him for getting the position. And he said, oh, I didn't get the position. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how do they make decisions where this other guy received the position? But anyway, so anyway, I was friendly with Chris. And then a few months later, I was contacted by the Aga Khan, and they said Chris had recommended me, right? But it was interesting because we were all competitors for this position. But obviously, acting cordial, being friendly, being helpful goes a long way. So all this to say, you never know when these positions will crop up, or when people will recommend you based on brief conversations and how you were with them. It's amazing. It's like magic almost about how that works. So again, people, sponsors, mentors, people willing to help you will come from unlikely places. Okay. Organizations, yes, join them. I've joined so many in my time, and not just join them, present at their conferences, because that raises your profile. There's been a couple instances where I have been offered positions just based on making a presentation. That happened when I was in the United Arab Emirates. Somebody from Qatar University heard me present, and no discussion, nothing. They just sent me a job offer. So things like that happen. I really encourage you to do that. It does raise your profile. It also allows people to hear your views, thoughts, strategies, procedures about education. Obviously, ALOC, Association for International Education Leaders of Color, has been a great help. And I'm on their platform right now. So that's been wonderful. Association of Independent School Heads offers some training and support as well. NISO and IRCOS, their Regional Teachers Association. I presented for NISA twice. NAIS, I went to the People of Color Conference most recently. It was first time in San Antonio. That was a very supportive, interesting environment, and I learned an incredible amount there. Also, your own country organizations, the Canadian Society for Studies in Education is something I belong to. And through them, somebody has contacted me and they want me to be one of their dissertation readers, right? And I'll also present at their conference in the spring. And there's some little obscure organizations too that are pretty powerful, like the International Confederation of Principals. And I think that's the most motley crew of principals I've ever met, but they are wonderful. And the conference I attended was in Helsinki, and they have conferences Helsinki, mostly like Africa, Australia. They're not so much American based or European based, but that's where I heard really cutting edge thinkers. By now, I'm sure you may have heard of, excuse me, Pasi Sahlberg. He's known as, the promoter father of the Finnish miracle, when Finland was doing so well on the PISA test. He talked a lot about that and strategies. He's from Finland, but I think he's working at a university in the States now. And I heard him speak in 2016, and he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And there were so many brilliant people who attended that conference. And then don't be afraid to go wider than educational organizations like the IMF, International Monetary Fund, the OECD. They are large think tanks, organizations, funders in some cases, that have a section purely about education. And their databases and their research is deep. It's deep and broad and wide, and you can always benefit from their comparative studies, the data that they give you, to help you in your own endeavors, in your own careers, no matter where you're at, right? So again, don't be scared to branch out. Sacrifice. I'm almost finished here. I think I've gone on so long. Leadership is demanding, no doubt about that, and it does involve compromises. My compromise when I was working as a head and studying, I had no social life for about 5 years, and I gave up fitness, which is tough. And it's taken me a long time to get that level of fitness back, and I'm not there yet. But I recently took up tap dancing because I thought that would be an easy foray into getting fit. Oh my God, that is so difficult. I never knew your feet had to move that fast. It's crazy, but I love it. I love it. And if you haven't seen that Gregory Hines clip of the challenge, please do so. It is amazing. So, but anyway, all this to say there are challenges, okay? And it takes a lot of work and energy to be a leader. So you must know your whys. You must have a bigger commitment beyond this is my job, okay? You also must be willing to bend, because you're not leading in isolation, especially now. You're leading in collaboration and in teams, and it is time consuming. I was fortunate, unfortunate. I didn't have a family to take care of or anything, so I could just solely focus on education. The way forward. I love tech bad boys, and so Steve Jobs is one of my favorite, like him or not. So his quote here: "We are here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why else? Do that." Langston Hughes, another favorite of mine: "A dream deferred is a dream denied." So if you're the least bit interested in leadership and moving up into other leadership positions, start now. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for listening to me. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Dale.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Are there any questions? Excuse me. And I'm not so good at negotiating this, Kevin, so please let me know if there are questions.
Okay, I'll check the chat. If y'all want to hop off, if you have any questions, or toss them in the chat, we'll look for them.
Could have been that comprehensive.
I'll hop in, I guess, if people are being shy. Thank you. So you mentioned that you prefer being a principal over a head of school. So I'm really curious because I mentioned at the beginning I'm going into my first headship role in July. So now I'm now a little trepidatious. So I'm wondering, like, what is it about the head of school role that turned you off, or maybe what is it about the principal role that it felt like a better fit or
Right.
superior for you?
Right.
Yeah.
To be honest, I love both roles, but for different reasons, right? In terms of head of school, you're also operating beyond the school and in the wider community. And I love making those links with industry, with business, so on and so forth. But you feel a step removed from the goings on in the school. Whereas as a principal, you're very much in touch with students, with parents, with teachers. It feels a little more hands-on, you know, as a principal. And so I always felt I had my hand on the pulse when I was a principal. As a head of school, I did love it, don't get me wrong. But again, your pulse was elsewhere, you know, it was very much beyond the school as well. And unless you set up instances to really connect with students, that didn't happen as much. So what I did, and it was at the suggestion of a student, they would tell me, we don't see you, you know, you know, and I thought I was around a lot. And so they asked me, can we have office hours? And I thought, great idea. And so I had office hours for students, and then teachers wanted office hours too. And I said, well, you can come anytime and I have meetings with you, but having that connection is really important. And it can be done as a head of school, but I found I had to consciously think about that because so much is coming your way. And if you're part of a wider network of schools, like I was at Mahindra, I would say about a quarter of my work was dedicated to the movement itself, right? And so that took time away from the school as well. Okay.
Go ahead, Thomas, hop in there.
Okay.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Dr. Taylor, I really appreciate hearing your journey through leadership. It's been really enlightening for me as I'm new-ish to leadership. I like what you said that, you know, leading without a title, because I was doing that in my last school and made it now to this point where it kind of fell into my lap this year to be the leader of our department. I'm a school counselor, so I'm the head of department. My question for you is, and maybe this is for other people who've been in leadership way longer than I have. I'm struggling this year with what leadership looks like at my school, and what it means to be a leader at my school. And this may be more of a, you know, reflection question for me.
Right.
But I'm also wondering, like, just trying to get more input. What do I do in the situation where I feel like, you know, the leadership that I believe in, or my thought of leadership and my school's thought of leadership look totally different? How do I confront that? How do I work through that on my end so I can still be, you know, bendable and not be so rigid, but also like aspire to make the changes that I see are needed, and so on and so forth. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And do you have a team you work with, right? And are you on the
Yes.
senior leadership team?
Yes. And
Oh,
that's where the struggle comes in right there.
Okay, then at some point you have to be on similar pages, if not the same page. And I think most administrators would admit, like, as long as you have that common vision, and to get to that common vision requires a lot of conversations about your strategic plans, about the mission vision of the school. But also see how much flexibility there is in how you get there, right? because strong teams are made up of people that have very different perspectives. And I don't know, there's a lot I don't know about your school and the ways of working, and how willing are they to hear those different perspectives. And I would always go to my immediate line manager and have those conversations and keep the doors of communication open. Don't let that shut down at all, and have that dialogue. Yeah, but on a simplistic level, I would just say, keep talking, speak up in those meetings about how you see things, and does anybody disagree? Right? I don't know if that works in your context. Obviously, you know best your context. But if you're not deviating from the mission, vision, and values of the school, you cannot be, chastised for that. Okay.
Thank you
And
so much.
I that's why I think it's really important, at the beginning of the year or somewhere near the year, is to go over your goals and your action plans so that you are transparent in terms of what you are trying to do, and what you're trying to achieve as well. Hope that was a bit helpful. Others can jump in too.
Yeah,
Can I jump in there? And unless Katrina wanted to jump in on this, or did you have a separate question? Okay. Yeah, I really love what you said, Dr. Taylor, there about bringing it back to the mission and vision. I think I'm just thinking about my current context here in Brazil, where we were trying to push through some DIJ work, social justice work, and facing some resistance. But me and a couple others at our senior leadership table, there's 12 of us at the table, and a few of us I would consider the social justice warriors, were able to kind of bring it back to mission, vision. We also brought it back to our strategic plan, which was developed 2022, and it had elements of DEIJ in there. So we knew we were facing some resistance, but we kept bringing the conversation back to the mission, vision, especially the strategic plan, which had DEIJ outlined as part of teaching and learning, and had elements of goals there for the teaching and learning department. So we said, if we're not going to adhere to this, then we have a big problem, and we have to take this back to our board of directors. So we were able to leverage those documents, and then also kind of from there start pushing for DEIJ policy as well. So I think those policies and statements are really important for those conversations.
Right. Good. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for the question, Thomas.
Okay, so I have a question. Hi, Dr. Taylor, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you face to face and interact, and not over WhatsApp or anything like that. So my question is, I came in a little late because I'm coming to you guys from the Search Associates Fair, which has been very interesting.
All the best to you there.
I've had some great conversations and some blessings coming my way. So it's been pretty good.
Good.
But what I wanted to ask you is, because I came in late, what countries have you worked in? And which country do you think your leadership was most effective, and you were able to lead in the ways that you wanted, and you were given kind of the freedom to lead?
Okay. All right. So, okay, let me think back to the countries I've been in. I've been in Thailand, Japan, and then Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. I was in Kuwait 3 different times in different roles. Then I was in Qatar. I've also been in Germany, then Turkey, then Bangladesh, and then India. Okay. Now, in terms of where I felt I was most effective, I'd have to say Qatar, without a doubt. ACS Doha, ACS was branded, so it doesn't stand for anything. It's not an acronym, it's ACS. They have 3 schools in the UK. I feel I was effective there. Mick, I was well supported. It was the first time I was a principal, and I was a founding principal. So I think this was something divine that happened that got me in the role. And I had the team on board from the very beginning. Okay, I was starting a middle and high school, and we started with 8 students. When I left, we had over 400 students, right? And so it was a gradation where we had a grade a year, and we had to bring in programs. Like when I went there, the building was still under construction, right? That's how new it was. And so we had to apply for authorization for the MYP and the DP within a year, basically. But I started by asking the team what they wanted to do, and truly made it a team effort and had them in on all the main decisions, right? Because I knew it would take a lot of work to get that authorization in such a short amount of time. But in order to graduate our students eventually in grade 12 in the IB, we had to do that process right away. And when I asked them the question, if you wanted to wait and we can take our time, or you want to do it now, they said, we'll do it now. Therein lies the importance of a team. And one thing I really liked about administration is being able to pick your team. Again, that selection is a team effort, but you really get a chance to know the personalities, the people you're interviewing, how they will work with other people on the team, and what the work ethic is like. Those teachers who start a school are a certain type of teacher, right? They're mavericks, they're on the cutting edge of everything, and they're not willing to coast and do things like you've always done, because there is no history. They're making history. And so your team is really important. I had a very good team there. Not that they weren't challenges, because when we had our first meeting and Diane introduced me as a principal to everybody, people were friendly, but there were a couple people, white individuals from the UK, whose mouths dropped. They couldn't believe I was their principal, right? So I had to get them on board really quickly, which we did with by being very collaborative and everything. And so I think I was really able to make a dent there. Was able to graduate a class, and there was a lot of question marks, and the parents had a lot of trepidation because it was a brand new school. We hadn't graduated anybody. We were unknown. But once we did that, and I brought the parents on board, right? The school didn't have a PTA, so I had a middle high school PTA, and getting that feedback from the parents was invaluable. And once they feel included and on board, they're going to do everything they can to help you. They're still on my Facebook, and I've left that school years ago, and they're still communicating with me. So it's important to have those really good relationships. I hope I answered your question.
You did answer my question, and I have a follow-up, because you said you were fully supported. Can you give me, when you talk about being fully supported, what are some of the things that this particular entity did that you hadn't experienced before when you talk about being fully supported?
Well, first off, Diane, first I had Tom, who was head of school, and he gave me a lot of leeway, right? And then he left after the first year, and Diane became the head of school. And she had an open door policy. I ran things by her. She basically said, it's up to you. What do you want to do? She gave me a lot of autonomy, and you missed the beginning of my presentation where I talked about my value. I value autonomy, and being able to make decisions and so on and so forth. I think that's why a lot of us go into leadership. And back then I had a lot more, because now it's more about collaboration, right? And so you're constantly negotiating. Whereas before, when I felt like a decision was right, I just made it, right? And Diane supported that. The senior leadership supported that. We had a lot of meetings where we were allowed to disagree. Yeah, we didn't all have to fall in line, and we encouraged that. But we walked away having a united front, and that was really good. And also, and I mean, this is the politics of things, the owner of the school, or the group of schools, or the person responsible for the trust for the schools, came over and got to know me, and we got along really well. Right? So I always knew that the person at the very top pulling the strings, having the money, was behind me, and we bonded. I mean, he's a white Welshman from Wales, but his grandparents lived in Barbados. I'm from Barbados. Those commonalities helped in terms of building relationships, right? And also, you have to perform, you know, graduated the class, got the IB authorization, kids were happy in the school, and all that matters. And when they saw that, they were, you know, senior leadership, the board were happy and went out of their way to support me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a list of things that I need to ask that I'm going to be
Right.
asking.
And
I'm going to have
also,
some autonomy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sinead, feel free to text me, WhatsApp me.
Yeah.
I have 2 former teachers I worked with at the fair right now, and we're going back and forth with questions and
Yeah.
me giving them advice. So I'm happy to do that for anyone who's at a fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Deanna, hop in there. Thanks, Sonny.
Dana has a question. Diana, sorry.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi, Diana.
Excellent. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, good. My question to you is regarding navigating conflict.
Yeah.
So you're navigating conflict not only at different levels of leadership, but you're also navigating it culturally in different ways, because every culture navigates conflict differently. So in what ways have you developed your capacity for navigating conflict? And if you have a pathway or suggested journals or practice, can you please share that?
Right. First off, right, I believe in a bit of a hierarchy there, like, where does the conflict originate? And if obviously between 2 individuals, and if they're at the same level, et cetera, I often encourage them to have that conversation. If they can't, they need to take it to their line manager. If that doesn't work, then it goes up the chain. But fundamentally, when 2 people are in conflict, you need to sit them down and listen to them both if they cannot work it out. And I know this sounds really simplistic, but listening without being judgmental and being absolutely fair is imperative. And ultimately, you have to look at what the goal is. It's always for the good of the students. The students come first in everything, right? And I don't know the nature of the conflicts you're describing. And sometimes you just have to agree to disagree, but one always has to be professional. And, you know, bringing it home, like even at my level now, I do have conflicts with individuals. And the other day, somebody blew up at me when I asked them to correct something. And this was somebody at my level. And his actions was totally inappropriate, right? So I get advice from my line manager, and then I write to HR, because you always go back to the policies of the organization and the code of conduct, etiquette, how we're to treat people in that regards. And that, I mean, that is firm, that doesn't really waver, right? But again, you're going to have to work with these individuals. So it's a constant dialogue about how you're going to work together if you see things radically differently. But if a transgression has occurred, depending on the severity of it, that needs to go to HR, or here in Canada, it may even go to Human Rights Tribunal. It depends on what it is. But you have, if you're mediating a conflict, it's about having the parties willing to sit down at the appropriate time, not when tempers are flaring, and listen to them both and give an impartial recommendation decision. It is not easy, and conflicts are anxiety arousing. And so it's having the skills to have those conversations and planning out those conversations in advance, right? Even if you have to take notes about what you're going to say and not deviate from that. It's not easy. It's not easy. That's why, leadership is tough.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I do have actually a comment for Thomas.
Okay.
If he's still around. Oh yeah, there you are. So as you're in this new role, a piece of unsolicited advice is you do have a certain amount of capita in that role, in that capital. And so you need to kind of decide how you're going to use it. And so sometimes those direct conversations about what leadership looks like for us so that we're on the same page, maybe one of those times where you need to spend a little bit of it, because you might spend a little of it and get nothing in return, or you might spend a little of it and then it multiplies, because then leadership is looking and saying, oh, someone is aware, or I haven't thought about it that time. So sometimes it's not necessarily out of lack of wanting to have continuity as a head, but it could be more like, I've been here so long, I've had this conversation with other people on my team about this, that they don't necessarily think about onboarding everyone who's new to the ideologies. And so sometimes it's just as simple as a remiss. And so, think about that moving forward, and always have a goal, at least two goals that you want to do for yourself to build your capacity as a leader. And then that's definitely where you can kind of go to your line supervisor and find mentors that can help you develop in those ways. Because you also have to, it's a game, you have to build what the school wants you to help lead, but at the same time, you also have to hone your own skills for the next big thing, or that you might be looking for. So it's a balance. So I would suggest those things to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Deanna. Mr. Adams, hop in here and then we'll take Thomas out.
He's on mute.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Taylor. I'm waiting for your book to come out because
Okay.
you've been everywhere. So I just know the chapters would be really juicy. So
Yeah.
you got my book as soon as you're ready to write it.
Thank you.
You said something very interesting in your presentation. You said, think about the generation you are teaching. And that brought me immediately to, the generation that I'm leading, right? So I'm in my 40s. This is my third principalship. I've been in leadership for over a decade, but I am noticing the difference in the generations that I, have an opportunity to lead, and they're very different. And
Right.
This particular generation, I happen to be a leader of a high school here in Columbia, where many of the teachers are in their 20s, and I remember being a new teacher in my 20s as well, being 21, 22 years old in New York City and having my first teaching position. But I remember being so open to learning. I remember having lunch with my assistant principal and, her helping me lesson plan and me copying down notes. Every word she said, I was copying down something in my notebook. I find the generation that I'm leading to be very different. Very rarely does anyone come into the office with a notepad and a pencil ready to take down notes. And this kind of also relates to something that Ryan said earlier about the strategic plan. The board, I find, is very supportive of the strategic plan, but it doesn't seem to reflect the values or the interests of the current generation of teachers that we have. And so I don't know the best way to ask this question, but I just find there to be significant cognitive dissonance between the strategic plan of the board, which we have their full support to implement, and leading this generation of teachers who don't necessarily see that as their strategic plan. They kind of come in with their own sort of, I'm going to be a teacher and this is what I do, but they don't see how their actions need to be aligned to the board strategic plan. And therein lies the conflict, right? I want to build great relationships with teachers, regardless of whatever generation they come from. But at the end of the day, my actions are going to be aligned to the board strategic plan, not to the newest teacher that just accepted the contract 6 weeks ago. So there's the conflict, and I'm not sure where to go from here because it's a very different generation. And this year in particular has been somewhat challenging because I've never worked with a predominantly 20-year-old staff. I've usually had a few veterans and a few mid-career and then some newbies, but it's primarily newbies, and it's very different for me, even though it's not my first time being a principal.
Right. But it sounds like it's a great challenge to have, because you're trying to meet different needs somewhere in the middle. And I do have some questions. Like, did the board involve everyone in the strategic plan in terms of input? And how was the strategic plan rolled out to teachers? Are they even aware of it? And if they're not, that presents really great opportunities to have that open discussion with the teachers about the strategic plan. And not knowing the details of it, would it be a question of work styles towards that common aim? Because I couldn't think that, a strategic plan for a school would be something teachers would be against. And often what in extreme cases people have done is that when new teachers come on board, teachers or people might say things in interviews that to get them hired, right? They're presented with the vision of the school, if not the actual document, but a broad view about where the school is heading and how it's going there, and are they on board or not? Do you think it's about the content of what's in the strategic plan, or is it in the how and the processes that the younger teachers are so different?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? So for me, the strategic plan is more of a public relations document because I don't see how the teachers were actively part of it, right? I don't see how the community was actively a part of it. They know it exists, they've seen videos on it, but it seems more of a public relations ploy. The accreditation visit that the school had back in 2018 has helped me communicate with teachers, because even if the strategic plan is unclear, we're preparing for reaccreditation in 2024. And for me, any changes that I've had to make or any decisions I've had to make, I have shared the recommendations, both the commendations and the recommendations from the previous strategic plan, to show the staff that, hey, these were the recommendations made back in 2018. Let's check them out. Here's where we did really well. And here are some areas where we were red, or here's where we were yellow. And here's why we're implementing such and such procedure this year. It's not because we want to change anything. According to the strategic plan, it aligns with this. But more importantly, our reaccreditation suggested that we make these particular changes back in 2018. I wasn't there in 2018, so I can't answer to why certain recommendations were not followed up on. But I have found that accreditation report has helped a little bit. In fact, it seems to help a little bit more than the strategic plan, because they're able to read in black and white. This is what a group of outside evaluators said about the school and what we're doing well. But there does seem to be a sort of perspective from many teachers that they want to be heard, and being heard means that someone will take their recommendations. And I feel like that's where there's a cognitive dissonance. There is an opportunity for everyone to share what they feel, but that doesn't mean that their recommendation is going to be implemented. Because when I
Yeah.
implement a decision, I have to make sure those decisions are aligned with both the strategic plan, and because I have a reaccreditation visit coming up in a year, I need to make sure that we have action steps that are aligned to that, and not just based on what someone thinks or feels because they
Right.
come into the office and they would like me to do A or B.
Right, and are they aware of that, that I'm referring to the fact that, yes, it can make suggestions, but those suggestions won't necessarily be implemented. And knowing that off the bat, and also, the RACI model in terms of who's responsible. I think going over models like that, so they know where they can have input and where they can make decisions and where the lines are, so that there are no surprises. I'm sure you do all of that, but it is very interesting how they think that what they feel should happen without having the larger context, without, being on the balcony and seeing the whole view of it.
Yeah,
It's
and that's why I thought it was important to at least share with them the accreditation visit report
Yeah.
from 2018, so they could understand that these
Helpful.
decisions are not just being made out of a magic hat. What they don't understand is that they have great ideas, but there's a way to do things as a team. So in my particular context, the entire leadership team is new, from the head of school down to every
Oh.
principal in the school.
all
And
right.
so I don't think everyone really understood what they were going to see this particular school year in August, because very rarely does a school have all new leaders, right, at every level. Maybe you change one or two.
Exactly.
So obviously the board had their own feelings about how things were going. And
Mhm.
so it's just a tap dance, because on the one hand, you don't want to say anything negative about the outgoing team and why such drastic changes might have been made by a board.
Right.
But at the same time, you need to let people know that these are kind of urgent things, not only because of the reaccreditation visit, but also because the board definitely wants to see these changes happen. And we feel the support of the board. It's just really hard to explain these things to very new teachers who, accredited,
Exactly.
just got certified. So for them, an accreditation visit is a whole different level
Exactly. All you can do is keep having those conversations with them, and I think it might change when the accreditors come in, right, and speaks with the staff. I think that's really important. And also they used to, depending on your accreditation body, they used to give presentations prior to coming in. Do you have that there?
We have not started. I mean, I'm actually an evaluator for Cognia, so I know the process very well. Unfortunately, we've had people with very strong opinions, and they've gone to parents and other bodies. So we're a little nervous about the process that's coming up, because when the board supported the leadership team after making sure that all the decisions were aligned to our strategic plan and our accreditation, some of the newer teachers decided that they would take their claims directly to parents. And so we are a little worried about our upcoming accreditation visit, just because of the mood of the school. And, it is a big change for teachers, even if they are in only their second year of teaching. It's a big deal to have a brand new leadership team, particularly having, leaders who are making sure our decisions are aligned with the strategic plan and the recommendations of the last accreditation visit back in 2018. It's like teaching a 101 level course.
Exactly.
But we don't have a lot of time. We have a visit in a year. So it's the urgency, but also understanding I need to have the patience to explain to new teachers the why behind the decisions.
Exactly, and constant communication. And trust that they'll come to you rather than go to the parents, or you bring in the parents to have a discussion with everybody,
Yeah.
It's not that easy. I know, but you'll get there.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, I don't know how we are on time. I have a just really quick question. I've appreciated hearing everyone's thoughts, and thank you again, Dr. Taylor, for doing this for us. My question is on presenting at conferences and stuff. You mentioned that's a great way not only to build capacity, but put your name out there, let people see who you are, the skills that you're working with and everything. I guess my question is truthfully, honestly, genuine, like how? I think there are a lot of things, and maybe it's me just selling myself short. I feel like I just do my job and I do what I need to do and I, take it home. But I'm sure there are things that I do that I could present on. So I'm guessing my question is, how do I start to kind of look at these conferences and these presentations as opportunities, and how do I, find the things that work for me?
Okay, so let me start by asking you this. Where are you? Where are you based?
Yeah, right now I'm in Shanghai, China. I'm at Shanghai American School, Puxi campus.
Urcos. Okay, I would start by looking at if there are any conferences, international conferences that come to China. I know you may fit into the Urcos region. I am not sure if you do or not. Do you have IB at your school? Okay,
Yes.
IB has conferences and that's a great place to start. And they have different ways to present. You can do a full-on presentation for 20, 40 minutes, or you can do a poster presentation. And you're in an enviable position because counseling's your background, right? Not a lot of us know about counseling and the strategies within counseling and what works. And with the fact that now there's so much attention paid to mental health and well-being, and not just the intellectual development of the child, but the whole child, especially the psychological aspect, we want to hear from you. So pretty much anything you can say will be eating up, right? And so even what conversations you have with colleagues, and if you don't feel comfortable presenting by yourself, find a colleague to have and interview each other, or there's so many interesting ways in which you can present. And then if you belong to any associations, they have conferences coming up, and usually they issue a call for papers. So it's checking those sites. Are you a personal counselor or a college counselor?
Great question. Yeah, I'm a school counselor. I've done college counseling as well, but primarily right now, social emotional counseling is what I do.
Right. And at what level? Middle, high school? High school?
Yes.
Okay. Because I was going to say AMLE is a really good conference, but that's specifically middle school. But again, I would start with IB, Urcos, even NISA, because NISA is a pretty interesting organization and very open. And even the principal organizations, they do need to hear from counselors too. The International Confederation of Principals, that's a really good one. And ones in your own field, take a look at. And yeah, as I said, it usually starts with a call for papers or abstracts about types of presentations. And if you write a short paper on a particular topic, and then basically what you're doing is presenting that paper. Or one format I really like are roundtable discussions, whereby you will present for about 15, 20 minutes on a topic and then get everybody else's input into that. And then you wrap up. So you have the benefit of a wide body of people. If I think of more, I can put it on ALOC, or send to Kevin to send to you, or contact me directly. Right? I'll put my email in here. And then, yeah, I can send you more resources. Okay. But just start. The thing is, just get over the inhibitions, because we need to hear from you. We really do. And just like we need to hear from Generation Z, they have a lot to teach us, right? So finding ways to hear from them and bring them into the conversation. But we really need to hear from counselors. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's my
for-
email. Anybody can contact me, any of you on this panel.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dale, for just sharing your journey, answering those queries. And like you said, Thomas, get started. It literally is one of those. Just I remember the first time someone was like, "Hey, we want you to present that." I'm like, "Huh?" Just say yes, get started. Even if it's at your school level, you know, even if the school does something, clustering with other schools, something local within China, just saying yes and getting started. I always say, just put yourself out there. But yeah, if you want to turn over to Ryan, and we'll close out.
Sure. So I'm again, Dr. Taylor, thank you. I've taken furious notes here, and I've already added you on LinkedIn. I'll certainly be hitting you up as on the next stages of
Sure.
my professional journey.
Happy to help.
I've just in the chat dropped a Google Doc, and that's got the 7 reflective questions. So I'm very mindful of time here. So I'm going to let everybody walk away with this. I haven't returned back to school yet. I actually go back tomorrow. So I'm sharing this out with my leadership team tomorrow. And we're going to go through, we're going to choose one of the questions and go through it on our leadership team meeting this coming Thursday. But this is certainly something that could take you a good, I think maybe 90 minutes if you went through this personally. But I just really liked how these questions were framed in terms of being reflective around 2022 and as leaders as we head into 2023. So hopefully you get some use out of it. I know some other leaders have already, so I just wanted to share that, have something in my back pocket to share with all of you today.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I see some people wanting to connect. If you want to put your email address here in the chat, feel free to do that. I know some people, Deanna, someone, Thomas asked about connecting. Feel free to network right within the chat over here. Excellent. If there's anything coming up, if you're presenting anywhere, let us know. I know, Shireen, you are. I'm doing personal plugs now. If you're presenting anywhere coming up, please let us know real quickly before we close, so others are aware. Shireen, you want to hop in here? Share.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I've made so many notes. I mean, I think I've written about 4 pages. Always a pleasure. And thank you to everybody in the room. Actually, the questions have been amazingly informative. Thank you. There are several places that I'm going to be presenting. The Outstanding Schools of Europe, CIS, I'm going to do a little stint there. CISA coming up, and then there's one more that I'm forgetting. And also there's internal ones in the school. We've got a gathering coming up with the IDEA task force that we had. That's going to be at our school as well. Kevin, are you coming to that one?
I'm gonna miss it, but Margaret's gonna be there. I know I'll be in the air. I was like, oh, I don't land in time.
Yeah, so I'll be presenting there as well. And for those of you that are interested in presenting, I don't know how my first opportunity came about. I think it was just that I was attending a conference. It was in a chat room. Somebody reached out and it snowballed. And I said to myself then, what's going on? I'm trying to do my job at the same time, but say yes. Say yes, and then think about it afterwards, because you know what you are doing. And like Dr. Taylor said, it's really, everyone has something to add to the conversation. So what you're doing, we need it. Okay. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Shireen. Anyone else hop in here if you're presenting somewhere coming up? And if not, check out, definitely if you're on the Facebook group, check out, we post as people send them, or as we find them, call for presentations and things like that. If you have any questions, I think most of us in here presented in some form or fashion, conferences internationally, let us know. And even like getting on, like, again, podcasts, sharing your story, your journey, things of that nature. If something you want to do with us, let us know. So lots of different areas and ways to share.
Kevin, I just want to thank you for
Very good.
I don't know if you can hear me, Kevin, but I want to thank you for this opportunity. Hopefully we can have some more leadership conversations. I'd love to have some around instruction. I know a lot of us share our journeys around DEIJ and things like that, but I would love to have some very specific conversations around what we're looking for instructionally, be it an instructional focus, be it our feedback to teachers, our coaching sessions with teachers. I would love to, see those opportunities exist as well, because I think a lot of people are now in the leadership positions and trying to fine tune their practices of the work.
Do that for instruction. Love it. All right, there's nothing else. Thank you again, you all, for being
Thank
here.
you, everybody.
Brian, thanks, Dale.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks
everyone.
all. It's a pleasure. All the best
Bye.
to you all this year. Bye.
Thank
you
you.
so much.